Welcome to Coffee Time. Coffee Time is a weekly show, if you call it a show. I'm in show business. Basically, whatever comes up during the week for me, I'll express it. It might be questions that people ask me. It might be, certain events that happen, like when the protests were going on. And the point of it is to kind of bring you into my world, bring you into my life, what it's like living here. What's the reality of living here now in Colombia, prior in Ecuador. I'm equally schooled on both places. Also, Coffee Time, it's my weekly fundraising event, so feel free if the mood strikes you. But I want to say a couple things before I get started. Well, first of all, the dating video has been up for about a week. It is available, but you have to email me with the email that you use for YouTube so that I can allow you access. And contributions are welcome for that. Also, I got a bunch of emails this week, and probably like you, I was pretty busy. I had a lot going on, the holidays and post-holidays. And so I've seen them. I just haven't gotten back. I know there's a gentleman coming down in March, and he wants, to set something up with me. There's a number of emails with some things going on. I'm aware of them, and I plan on responding today to all those emails that have been sitting in my email box for the last, within the last week. And for the Buffalo Bills, if we could all have a moment of silence. But hey, I'm used to it. I'm a Bills fan. And so I always go back to our Bills motto. There's always next year. Oh, what a heartbreaker. What a heartbreaker. Okay, this is not football time. This is coffee time. Usually I already had my coffee by the time I start this video. I want to tell you something about coffee before I get to the topic. The topic today is going to be, is Colombia poor? And I'll tell you why that came up and why I wanted to talk a little bit about it today. Also, in coffee time, after I'm done yapping, it's open for questions, and you put 4 question marks and your question, and I'll answer them. I want to talk about this coffee. Now, I don't know if you're seeing this forward or backwards. I'm guessing you might be seeing it backwards, but it says PAR, P-A-R, PAR. And I went to get my favorite coffee, which is called Sorrento, 2 R's, Sorrento. And Quindío coffee is probably my second favorite, although they have a bunch of types. But Sorrento is my favorite coffee by far. It's the best coffee I've had down here. I don't think you can get a bad coffee. So when I talk about good or bad, they're in comparison to each other, because the world's best coffee is now and has always been Colombia, in my opinion. I know Hawaii and, Ethiopia, and, I get all that. And I've had those coffees. And there's some really good coffees out there, but I don't know. I like Colombia. I'm living here in Colombia. And I've always liked Colombia, and I've always liked Colombian coffee. You just can't go wrong with it. But I want to tell you about this coffee before I really get going. This is Edición Especial Red Honey, special edition red honey. And on the bag here, it says, I can't see up close. I really need bifocals. But the town or the area that these are from, this particular bag is from, is Finlandia. I've shown you videos of the place. The cultivator is Victor H. Serón. It's got the name of the farm, the altitude it's grown in, the variety of the coffee bean. It's got all kinds of information, profile of the cup of coffee. And bear with me, but I want to read this. Juan Valdez. He's on holiday. I want to read this. Please don't tune out. Okay, this par, that's par excellence, which means the ultimate. Gives life to a unique and delicious cup of coffee of our brand. Is the union and the complement between man and coffee bean. A cup of par coffee, the majestic combination of flavors translated into a breath of sensations containing each essence of the crop. The acidity in some areas, the citrus or residual notes of panela, that's a sugar, in others. The present fruity and floral aromas, the body of the coffee drink, of the relation between the barista and the grain characteristics, and definitely common in all, the taste of Quindío as a historically diverse and authentic region. When you savor Pahar coffee, you are immersed in an experience that captivates the palate with one of the most beautiful and emblematic transformation, the taste that begins in your mouth, which then remains in your soul. Woo! I don't like this coffee. Hey, poetry in motion here. The taste that begins in your mouth but remains in your soul. I mean, how cool is that? I don't know who thought of that, but that's pretty cool. But the coffee kind of sucks. I went to buy my Sorrento, and all they had was the ground. And I always get the beans because it takes me a while. These are basically 1 pound. They're 500 grams, so they're basically a pound. This one is one of the more expensive one here. It's 25,500, so $6 maybe. I don't know, maybe about that for a pound. It's it's a premium brand here. It's one of the more expensive, and it's what I'm drinking, and I've got 2 more weeks of it. And while, like I said, you can't really get bad coffee, but it just does not suit me. Now, this brand doesn't mean this is all you have, and this is really what I want to point out about coffee here, is like Quindío. Quindío has so many different coffees based on the region and the characteristics of the coffee and the altitude. The flavors vary so much, more than wines. And this is just one particular one. So I could go through and try the 15 or 20 different varieties that they have, and I might find something I really like. I won't do that because I don't like going a month. That's how long it takes me to drink one of these, a pound a month. I don't like going through a month and drinking coffee I'm not fond of, and it's a little bitter for my taste. Okay. Wow, send me some. Yeah, it was quite a description, wasn't it? Comes in your mouth and remains in your soul. Okay, so why do I want to talk about is Colombia poor? And I don't know if it's been done to death, but everybody's assumption, it seems, that come here is that Colombia's poor. Why do they assume that? Because when they enter Colombia, they see poverty. You'll see tin shacks, you'll see beggars on the street, and you get the impression that all Colombians are poor, and or most Colombians are poor, and everybody's suffering and everybody's struggling. And I've talked about this in different ways a number of times, and if that's what you think, you don't get it. You just don't understand it. And if you talk to a Colombian who is poor, then that's going to be his point of view too. But there's a lot more to Colombia than that. And why, why am I talking about this? I got a message, a notification of Facebook. Somebody mentioned my name. And so I went in. I avoid Facebook for the most part these days, but except for the adventure in Grand Colombia, I try to put some things there of interest. That's our Facebook page. But for the most part, I try to avoid it. And there's so much drama. People want to argue about things, and most people don't take 2 seconds to actually know what they're talking about. But my name comes up, it's notified, so I go in and I look, and I don't even recall why somebody put my name, but so I'm looking through this thread, and it began as a nice thread, but then somebody comes in and he chimes in about, you know, how desperately poor Colombians are, and, you know, there was an insinuation that, you know, it's maybe they don't work so hard, and then compared to the United States, you know, in the United States, you know, we work ourselves to death, and that's not really the case. I feel that I work myself to death, but I love work and was by choice in the United States. But it's not really the work that's the problem. It's what we do when we're not working versus what they do here when they're not working. And it makes all the difference in the world. But his basic premise that Colombians don't work as much as in the United States works more, it's simply not true. Colombia is tied. I had to look this up. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know the stats, so I had to look this up. And tied for first in the world of the most hours worked per week is Colombia at 47.9 hours a week. Tied for, well, I'll mention this. So I said something about, well, it's not really the case. They basically they work 6 days a week here, and so he responded. I don't like to get into a tit for tat, and that was really where I ended it. But he responded with, yeah, but in the United States, for people to make it, they have to work a lot more hours, and you know, like overtime or second jobs or something. Well, he said most people, and it's simply not true. This is just pulling stuff out of your butt. I mean, it's simply not the case. It's such a low percentage of the people that work 2 jobs in the United States. And to say that, well, I have to work more, well, no, it doesn't work that way. A business is going to decide whether they want you to work overtime or not. You just don't say, oh, I'm going to work overtime. You know, you can get some overtime hours, but that's factored in to this calculation. And I didn't dig to see where the United States was rated, but I did look at the top 15, and the United States wasn't in it. Number 2 in the Colombia is number 2 in the percentage of workforce that works over 60 hours a week. It's number 2, and the United States is not in the top 15 at 17.2%. So 17.2% of the people that work in Colombia are working over 60 hours, and number 2 in the world. So, you know, and he wanted to argue, like I said, I just stopped at that point because the guy is just arguing, you know, what he thinks is the case, but he doesn't really care to take a minute to look to see what's really the case. So first thing is Colombians are exceedingly hard-working people. They like to work. They want to work. And given the chance, they will work and work and work. But we're talking about poverty. You know, is Colombia poor? And so I'm just going to throw out some stats here. First of all, Colombia is classified as a country, as an economy, as an upper middle income. So that puts them in the top 25% of the world's economies. Doesn't mean they're rich, but the economy is pretty strong. So there you can look at it as, because this kind of floats around from year to year, they're either at the top of the average or they're at the bottom of the wealthy when it comes to economies. Sometimes the upper economy, the top economy, they will sometimes float to the bottom of that. So the economy itself is pretty strong, it's pretty healthy. I've mentioned this before, 26% of the people in Colombia fall into the poverty rate. This is from a world standard. And from a world standard, 23% of the United States falls into it. So it compares it to its own economy. So in other words, if a dollar in the United States is a dollar, that dollar in Colombia, 25 cents would be the equivalent of that. So hopefully you can understand that. The economy is about a quarter of. So if you're within the economy, it feels like it's the same, but that's the relationship. So the poor in Colombia is 26%, it's 23% in the USA. The extreme poor in Colombia is about 7%, a little over 7%. And I can probably see, well, no, I can't from my balcony, but I can walk around Armenia and I will see extreme poor. And if I walk around Baltimore, I can see extreme poor. And if I walk through Appalachia, I'm going to see lots of extreme poor. Every country, as you know, I'm pretty well traveled. I've lived in a number of other countries. I've traveled to almost 24 countries. And every country I've ever been to, including France and England and Germany and Holland, I've been to these countries, Denmark, you'll see poor. Poor exist. So it's a percentage of the poor. So, you can't walk through the slums of Detroit and say, all Americans are, living on the street in poverty. It just doesn't work that way. Yet people will come here and they'll see poor and they'll see, a beggar comes up to them or whatever, and they say, Colombia is this poor, destitute country and people will do anything for money and blah, 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 blah. And it's so ridiculous because the same characteristics of the people that they're talking about, you can see anywhere you travel. It doesn't make that country. Yeah, it's part of the fabric of that country. There's, whatever the poverty is. And, there's a long question, there's a long running question about, would you rather be rich in a poor country or poor in a rich country? And it's something to ponder. It's something to contemplate. I mean, you could almost say in the United States that it's almost impossible to be poor because there's so many things out there, but everything is relative. I also want to note that Colombia is really, their economy is kind of on a skyrocket up. I've told you about when I was here before. I left in 2002. And at that time, over 50% of the population was without work. In 2008, 6 years later, I had trouble finding stats. It mostly goes by census, so getting current stats can be difficult on some of these things. But the unemployment rate in 2008 was 42%, so it hadn't changed a whole lot from when I was here 6 years prior. But the unemployment rate of today, while too high, it runs about 10%. That's a huge change. Another little tidbit to throw out is in Bogota, and which is the strongest city, but also contains most of the population. In Bogota, over 50% of the people living in Bogota are middle class. I'm not saying upper middle class, I'm not saying rich, I'm not saying poor. The actual middle class, it's over 50%, it's 51 point something percent. And I'd like to be vague on these because, in 2 months a study might come out and it might be 54%. Somebody will watch this and say, you were making this up. And so I tend to, I ballpark things like stats. They're good to get an impression of things, but wouldn't bank my life on them. So if 50%, more than 50% in Bogota is middle class, then you have your upper middle and you have your upper class and you have your poor and you have your destitute poor. And all of those combined are less than the middle class. Another thing that I saw, I didn't put in my notes here, but the middle class in Colombia, almost half of the middle class in Colombia have their own transportation, be it a motorcycle or car. They have their own transportation. Now, most people live in cities where you don't even need your own transportation. That equals disposable income. And I've mentioned this a few times before when people want to talk about, how everybody's poor down here and everybody will do anything for money. And it's insulting, it's condescending, and it's just wrong. You can see in my videos when I'm out walking around, you can see all of these new or almost new cars on the street constantly. Who's buying? Who owns these cars? It's just a constant stream of new cars. When I go to the mall, I've done videos in there. You see all of these people in there shopping. Who's in there shopping if they're so destitute and so poor? Now you could say, well, it's the upper middle class and the rich, and there is disparity of wealth in Colombia. You're going to get that when you have an active, growing economy. You're going to get more disparity. But the thing is, if you look at the poverty rate, the unemployment rate, everything is vastly improved along with those rich getting rich. So you can point at that and say, well, it's so grossly unfair that it's not a matter of fair. What difference does it make to you if your life is better, if it's easier for you to get a job, if it's easier for you to move into a middle class that didn't even exist a few decades ago, if your life on the whole is so much better than what your parents and your grandparents were, that should be your focus. And you can continue to grow. It's an economy that's expanding and bringing more people into it, and that middle class is expanding and expanding. And yeah, you've got rich getting rich. They say something like, what is it? The upper 1% has 46 times the income of a middle class person, something along those lines. Yeah, well, that happens, but you could take a country like Venezuela where you have such a very few amount of rich, and then everybody became poor, and there is no middle class anymore. So the economy is strong, it's healthy, it's getting better constantly, and the over 50% I mentioned in Bogota are middle class. Somebody will say, well, what about Medellin? It's about 46%. So it's almost half of the people in Medellin are middle class. And you still have your rich and upper middle, and you still have that other mixture out there. So the amount of poor, the perception about how many people are so poor, it's just wrong. And most people that are middle class live in stratus 3 or 4. Well, I live in 5, and I'm 1 block from stratus 6. So I would be considered, based on where I live, to be upper middle or upper, class financially. Half of the city of Medellin is really in stratus 5 or 6 in the north. Well, maybe not half, but a good portion of it. And it's who's living there, who's buying these places, who's living in these places. Is it all these poor that people have this perception of? Now, it's not a rich country, it's not a poor country. It's like I said, it's in the upper 25% of the economies of the world. So it's doing pretty well, and it's growing and getting better. A little tidbit is emeralds. Depending on what year, between 70 and 90% of the world's emeralds come from right here in Colombia. And a good quality emerald of a certain size is worth far more than a diamond of the equal quality and size. There's a lot of industry in here. There's a lot of exports. They do gold, they do shrimp farming, they sell bananas. It's such a strong and healthy economy. You can't have that if everybody's poor. So I hope that puts to rest some questions about the economy and about how many people are poor. And yes, there's poor here, but it's not that bad. You should have seen it. You should have seen it when I was here almost 20 years ago. It's a world of difference. This is a world-class country. This, with its poor, but I saw them in France. I lived in Japan for 3 years. In Japan, and nobody would think of Japan as being poor. It's a very expensive place to live, but that doesn't mean anything. It's all relative. And I traveled all over Japan. And I can tell you that village after village, not Tokyo, not Yokohama, but in the villages, you would see places that are very similar to what would be called Stratus 2 here in Colombia. Almost tin shacks. And in the south, you could actually see things the equivalent of tin shacks. There's an extent of poor in Japan as well. And you have areas that things are not expensive. They're rather cheap, but it's for a reason. So, people don't go to Japan and condescend to them. And, it's like, oh, these poor little people. And like, you really should get that out of your mind. It's ill-informed and insulting. And imagine if you're sitting here, in Colombia or in Ecuador. I saw this all the time. Imagine if, it's like the gringos come down from North America or over from Europe, and they look at us and, they think that we're all poor beggars, and we're desperate for that little handout, the tip thing that I've talked about. And imagine how insulting that would be. Okay, let me get off my high horse. Let's get to some questions. Let's see what, let them think that. More room for us. Doc William, thank you. Appreciate the contribution. That's why they call them developing countries. This actually isn't in that category. Colombia is above that category. Ecuador is definitely a developing country. All countries are developing. So I mean, from a broader standard, you could say, yeah, I mean, look at the United States in just the past few years, how much more it's developed itself. But from the financial description of that, Colombia is beyond that. Colombia is what some people want to call first world. That's another misused thing, third world. It's a political statement, not an economic one. And it goes back to the Cold War. And I know a lot of you know that. It's not a third world country, never was actually. It is developing in the sense of just the word developing, but in the economic category, it's a developed economy. You're preaching to the choir, Lauren. Sorry about that, but yeah, I see this so much. And even people that come here and visit, these are some of the questions that they'll ask me. But I will appreciate that they're asking and they're not making assumptions. And so far, the people that I've met up with have been very realistic, but maybe because they watch these videos, I don't know. They've done their homework, it seems. But I'll be asked questions about that. And everybody seems to be surprised when I talk about how tipping in Armenia is insulting and you really shouldn't be doing it. And when we get into the whole reason of why that is, they seem to be, quite surprised. Now, Medellin, I know you've got some viewers from Medellin that are living in Medellin, and I didn't say that. And Medellin, it's been going on for such a period of time by so many visitors that it's become kind of expected. But that's not a Colombian cultural thing. Okay, not seeing any questions. Are we done for the day? If you have any questions, 4 question marks, I'll give you a moment. We're pretty much on time. 4 question marks in the question. Do you have a contingency plan in case you become sick? How would your family and US be notified if you were incapacitated? Please put 4 question marks. It's a lot easier for me to see the questions. I missed one last week, but I got a hold of the person personally and responded to him. Do I have a contingency plan? Well, you know, I have a plan. If I become sick, I have a particular coverage. I've talked about this before, where I would have a flight back to a VA hospital in North Carolina, and they pay for my stay and they pay for the medical. It was a very short-term plan. It's on my health card. I actually have foreign coverage, and I guess that was only available for a year or two if you were in the military back in Vietnam era, and I happen to be one of the people that got that. So I'm covered as far as that goes. Costs here for simple things are pretty non-existent. I have not yet signed up for Colombian insurance. I probably will, probably next month. I just, to be honest with you, I went through that financial scare that I had that went on for a number of months, that even $37 a month, I look at it and say, geez, I don't know if I dare commit to that, because that's a lot if you don't have anything. So, you know, I've been dragging my feet on it, but that looks like it's pretty taken care of and stabilized. And so I don't think I have that issue anymore. So I'll probably sign up for it, but not for anything catastrophic like you're talking about. Just, I don't know. I never really get sick. I mean, I had cancer, but that, if I had that again, that would be something I would go back to the US to take care of, simply because everything is totally free. I don't have to pay a dime for anything. They pay for the flight back, and they pay for, if it's out care, they pay for a hotel for me to stay in. It doesn't get better than that. So, and I know that's the case because when I had cancer, I started using that plan. It was pretty amazing. So for me in particular, it's, you can't judge what would be good for you based on what goes on with me. If I didn't have that, I would absolutely sign up for the $37 a month EPA plan here. I would probably choose Sura, possibly Sanitas. Those are 2 top tiers here in Armenia out of about 14 choices. And I would just pay the 37 a month, and if something came along, then that would take care of me. Also takes care of eyeglasses and dental and a whole realm of things. I don't have much family left. I've got a son and daughter, and I've got a half brother and a couple step brothers, and I'm in contact with them, hit and miss. Everybody's busy, including me. Our lives are busy, so you know, we touch base once in a while, but they're all grown and they've all got, you know, things going on, and I don't have any. I don't have the kind of situation where I really have to worry about that. Would they be contacted? Yeah, actually they would know about it. And one of the ways is, uh, actually in a number of ways, and one of the things is Facebook. We actually use Facebook to contact each other. I said I don't like to get involved in Facebook. That's in these group pages where people just talk out of their butt. But as far as, you know, communicating through there, it's pretty useful. The original intent, and it seems to work for us. So they would know simply from that. If I kind of dropped off the earth, they would know something was going on. But yeah, there's actually a mechanism set up. So. I'm not sure what you mean. How are you there for the time you are as far as a visa status? How am I here? If you mean what visa, I'm here on a retirement visa. You get it for 3 years and then you renew it. And after 2 more years, you can apply for, you get permanent residency. And the reason it's 2 years, and not, even though you're getting another 3-year visa, but it happens in 2 years, it's because the laws, keep changing and certain things don't. And so it's kind of broken up like that. But I'm here now going on 2 years of the 3-year visa. So in about a year and a half or less, I'll go to Pereira and pay the money to the lady to go to Bogota and handle everything, and I'll get my renewed retirement visa. And then after 2 years of that, I'll be a permanent resident. Okay, that was a question. All right. Just, I wasn't sure. Any other questions? The coffee is almost done. Tell you what, I'm drinking it through my mouth, but it's remaining in my soul. All right, that's it. Thank you for the contribution. I really appreciate that. And don't forget that dating video is up, so let me know. Have I been to Medellin? Yes, a number of times. I haven't been in quite a few years. I do plan on trying to get there. All my travel like that, except for local travel, really kind of relies on sponsorship. So I'm sure that'll happen. And I've got kind of my own take on Medellin. I think it'll be useful to people considering living there. And I will say again, because I know some of you are new, my view of Medellin is it's a world-class, outstanding city with amazing things to offer, but I would never want to live there. It is not for me. It's way overcrowded. The traffic is insane. I mean, watching motorcycles and taxis go up on the sidewalks, and it's polluted much of the time, and I am not a fan of that. I don't like having my eyes burn or my lung. It is not for me. It's too big. But to go and visit, it's amazing. It's also, kind of pricey, although depends on where you are. I mean, if you're in the top 2 barrios, it's going to be expensive. But if you move out into some of the other barrios, like Envigado or Bela or something like that, it's much less expensive. But I love where I am. That's why I am where I am. I mean, I've known these places, and I chose here. In Armenia, my second choice would be Manizales, and beyond that, there really isn't anywhere I would choose to live in Colombia. Not that there aren't some spectacular places, but we all have the things that we like. We all have the things that we don't like. And for me, there just isn't any other place in Colombia I would want to live. But I love where I am in this entire region here. And Medellin is just not part of it, even though for many people it would be spectacular. I mean, if you love living in Manhattan, then you're going to love living in Poblado. What percentage of the time do you eat Colombian food? not counting burgers. Not that often. I mean, the traditional Colombian food, half of the time. When I lived here before, I found it to be very boring, because at that time, it's all that was available. There was nothing else available. There weren't even burgers available. I remember making spaghetti and meatballs for my ex-wife's family, and they had never seen it. They'd heard about it, but they'd never seen it, certainly never tasted it. It was a huge hit because the food is just so monotonous to have the same things for lunch every day. I mean, overcooked chicken, overcooked beef, overcooked pork. Salads are always good, fruits are great, but cheese and arepas, and it just got so boring. Not that there weren't good things in it, like sancocho. I mean, I love the stuff, but to have it all the time, I love empanadas if they're done well and they're fresh. But to have that all the time would drive me crazy. I'm just not that kind of guy. I like variety. I need variety, and I cook. So uh, I need to break it up. Now, burgers. I talk about burgers all the time because it's one of my, if not my favorite food. But the truth is, I don't eat them that often. I probably have maybe 2, 3 burgers in a month. So I don't eat them that often. I I do think Colombian food has gotten so much better than it used to be. You have a lot of foodies now in Colombia, but you also have so many other kinds of food that it's kind of like in the US. It's like, what's American food? Everything's American food. Chinese food is American food. As a matter of fact, it's Americanized, so it's not even really Chinese food. And you have Japanese food, and you have Mexican food, and it's Tex-Mex, and it's like it's America's spin on it. Well, in Colombia, that is developed, and so you have Chinese food here, you have Japanese, you can get sushi. There's all kinds of things, and it tends to have a Colombian spin on it. And so, do I eat Colombian food? Well, from that standpoint, yeah, that's mostly what I eat, is what people here eat. Um, I will tell you this, that the $2 to $3 lunches, which are good and nutritious in most cases, far more than they were in Ecuador. So much healthier here than in Ecuador. However, it would bore me to death. Yes, you can eat those every day, and your food bill will be quite low, especially if you don't cook. It's not a bad way to go. But for me, it would make me crazy because you're eating basically similar things day after day after day, and I just have to have variety. But it's a way to go. If you don't care, if it doesn't mean that much to you, and you just want to eat cheap and keep that cost down, then you could spend $5 a day and be full. Richard, thank you. I appreciate the contribution. COPD. Uh, what is that? I know what that is. I'm drawing a blank. It's this Alzheimer's that seems to be kicking in. COPD. Share that with me. Is Armenia good for a person with COPD? Somebody spell that out for me. Now, come on, there's no delay here, so get to typing. Yeah, delay's gone. All right, what do we have here? In '08, I ate Colombian, had a beer for lunch 99.9% of the time, along with walking several miles a day. When I turned to the U.S., Virginia, I had lost 45 pounds and had the best blood workup since in years. Uh, yeah, the food is good and healthy, like I said. If you eat those things, of course, if you eat picada every day, which is deep fried meats, uh, it may not be as good for you. But And the walking has so much to do with it. People say, well, Colombia, it's just healthy to live here. Well, if you were in the United States in Virginia and you walked the same amount every day and you ate, basically non-processed food, I would say the same thing would happen. It's just kind of easier here because it's what, so much of the lifestyle is here. Oh, Veterans Administration. Gotcha. Um, Lung problems, breathing problems. It's a breathing disorder. Probably wants to know if it's dry or wet conditions. Uh, well, it's kind of wet conditions, but it's not really muggy. And I used to get allergies if I would go out and cut the grass. If certain times of the year they say pollen, that yellow stuff that would cover everything, I would have some allergies from that. And I have no allergy issues here. My nose is a little stuffy. I turned the fan on last night and it was blowing right on me, and it kind of stuffed me up. It got a little cool at night like it does, and I don't know, I had no blankets on. I was just hugging a pillow, and I woke up a little stuffy, but it's not from allergies or anything like that. It'll clear up as soon as I go out and walk in the sun later today. I don't know. I can't answer that because I'm not a medical profession. I would just guess that, it's clean air. Here in Armenia, we don't have any pollution. And even if we had a little pollution, the wind never stops blowing in the same direction, goes this way, never stops blowing. So even if there was any, it would blow it away. So I think that's, first of all, the biggest thing. Second of all, even though it rains a lot, there's not a lot of allergy prone things here for whatever reason, or I would know that. And I've been here before and now long enough to know that if that were the case. So I would say better than most places, but that's something I think you'd want to talk to a doctor about. Make any decision on the merchandise yet? No, I haven't. I haven't made a decision on that. It goes along with the software that I was using before. It's a module, it's part of that. And I'm going back and forth on it. I don't want to do it unless I'm going to stick with it because of the overall package, the overall things that I would have to do. It would take a lot of work to set up the rest of it and to sort out that delay. There's all kinds of things there. And so for me, it's a big decision, and the merch is only a portion of that. So I'll let you know as soon as I make that decision. And right now, I'm really on the fence. So it'll probably be another week or two before I decide. Visa question again. For the third step after 5 years, do you need to financially qualify under the same rules of the first two retirement visa steps? Well, the rule remains the same unless they change the rule. Like everywhere, laws will change. You have people that are panicked over that video that was put out about a proposed law that still has not come to pass. And, this was a couple months ago that video came out. So, you can't go on proposals, but if that were the case, if that law turned into be true, then the minimum amount would have gone up to what I think $1,100 or something. And so much of it depends on the exchange rate at the time, because what it does is it takes your basic minimum income times 3. Now the basic minimum income, which a lot of people, and this is another reason people think Ecuador must be a poor country, is about $266 right now. And people say, oh my God, that's what people are making. No, that's a basic minimum income. It's like minimum wage. If you're at $7.25 an hour, it does not mean that most people are in the United States are making $7.25 an hour. It means if you're a high school kid working at McDonald's on the counter, That's, you know, that's a minimum requirement. So here they also have a minimum required wage, and a fair amount of people, you know, in that poverty range of the 26%, you may fall into that. But so anyway, it's about $266 right now times 3. So it's, is it 266? Might not even have that right. It's about $800. Let's put it that way. So 3 times the minimum, it's about $800 right now. It's a little under 700 and something. But if the exchange rate were to change dramatically, then that might go to $900. They might change the law, and what if they change the minimum income? That's something that tends to go up. And a couple years ago, it went up 7%. So that's a healthy increase. So there's so many things that come into play, but taking all of that into account, you're looking at, you know, $1,200, $800, somewhere in that range of where it's going to be. And that range, there's no expectation, there's no reason to think that part of it is going to change. Altitude, back on the lung thing. Altitude here, it's low enough where that will not come into play. I've lived in high altitude. I've lived on sea level. The altitude here, and I have some sensitivities to altitude, as it turns out. Anything below 8,000 feet, though, and I'm okay. So when I was in Manizales, it's about 7,200 feet. It was okay. Although, if I was out walking really fast, then I could become a little winded. And here in Armenia, that doesn't really happen. Because we're less than 5,000 feet. It just really isn't an issue here. Okay. Did I leave anything out? Okay, I think that's it. How are we doing for time? Well, time's about up too. Okay, so that's it for today. For the contributions, thank you. It's greatly appreciated. It's what keeps everything going, and I kind of rely on Sundays to do that. The dating video is up. Don't forget about that if you haven't seen it. I think you'll find it very useful if you plan on coming down here and, you know, living a life that's not going to be just alone. And it's a beautiful sunshiny day, typical. You say, well, I thought you said it typically rains. Yeah, for maybe half an hour in the afternoon, but this is what most of the day is like. Hold on. I mean, how gorgeous is that? Craig has another question. What? I'm not seeing it. And he deleted that, so I don't know. I'm lost. I'm confused. Okay, so that's it. Thank you all for coming. Thank Hobo Traveler. Can't stand watching his videos anymore, but I love the guy and appreciate his lifestyle. But his contribution to the world, I think, is that statement. And there's a lot to that. I mean, I love where I'm living, and I have some people that I know in the United States that are constantly complaining. Oh yeah, I take a minute since we've got a minute. I've got a minute to. I said that in the United States, it's not the amount that we work that's the killer. And why in Colombia, if they work more, why don't they have the same issues? Here in Colombia, the stress level is almost non-existent. They know how to deal with stress. They deal with stress by having family, by having a social environment that shares the load, whether it's just going and talking about, you know, something that they're dealing with, but they don't have to, and they don't shoulder things alone. There is a constant festival, party, any reason they can get out and do something. um, they will do that, because for them, they work for their family, they work to make a better life, but for them, their focus is on the life itself. And if you were to offer a Colombian $50,000 a year, but they would have to give up their family and family time and like that, versus $15,000 a year, but they can have their family and their festivals and all their good time, you won't find many Colombians that will sacrifice what they get from their family and that kind of lifestyle for money. The money is less important. In the United States, we tend to look at it as, we can do the money thing, we make the money, and then at some point we can break away and chill and relax and begin to enjoy life. It's the view that we have in the United States, how we handle things, how we address things, and it's the society itself. In the United States, I mean, you go to places like Los Angeles and you start meeting people, and you won't find very many people who are born and raised in Los Angeles. And that's just one example. People are so mobile in the United States that we just, oh, there's a good job in Oklahoma. Oh, then I'm going to go to Oklahoma. I ended up in North Carolina because of vice president of a company. You know, it's we're it's nothing for us to make that decision. Where here, I don't want to have to move away from my friends and my family and the life that I have, even though these opportunities might be greater. It's not to say that you don't have some. You have people that will go to Bogota. My nurse friend, she just packed up. Uh, she finished. She's a nurse. She was taking some extra classes for an upgrade, and as soon as she finished, she went to Bogota because there's more jobs to make more money, and she's got a relative there, so she can live a lot cheaper than just going cold. But even then, if she didn't have that relative there, she probably would not have gone. So she's got extended family to be with. So the decisions, what's important, how they handle stress, that's what comes into play, and that's what the difference is. They work harder here, the stats show it, but they handle it so much better. Yeah, that's actually, we did that, and I didn't have a camera at the time. A good video would be to drive through the different neighborhoods, discuss what the stratuses are and what it's like in each stratus. You know, talk about the differences of that, and that's, yeah. I wish I'd had the camera when we did that, but I didn't, so we'll have to do that. And Charles, yeah, I've talked about it, but to go with a video and show it, and I get his point, because we were together when I did that. In other words, to kind of duplicate that, I think would be a great video. Colombia is closer than some trips across the USA. Absolutely, it's just a handful of hours away. Okay, that's it. Let's wrap it up. It's been exactly an hour. So I've already thanked you to death. I thank you once more. That's the end. I'll see you next Sunday. Oh. Wednesday. I'm going to do I'm going to do a cost of living video, unlike the way I've done it before. I've always talked about it philosophically. This time, I'm going to show you prices on apartments and you name it. Shampoo. I don't know. Somebody might find it interesting. So that's what's going to come up Wednesday. Ciao.